Hey there folks. Alright, let's have a look at After Effects, shall we? So you'll see here, let's fling it over to number 2 there. Alright, so when you first see it, you'll probably see an opening dialog box. You can start from there, or you can go to this main screen. So basically what we're looking at is pretty much 3 main windows. So this one up here, if you click, you'll see the blue, whatever's active becomes blue. And this is the composition window, and from it you can either create a new composition from scratch or from footage, and we're going to do that in a second. And then over here you'll see it's the project window, and it actually doubles as the effect controls panel as well, and we'll get into that. So basically the project window is where everything is going to be stored, or where it's referenced on your hard drive. The thing about After Effects is that it never actually changes the raw files, the original files. It just references them. All right, so keep that in mind. You always need to have those original files in referenced and with you in the hard drive somewhere. All right, so then down here we have our timeline. Obviously nothing there right now, and then a whole bunch of windows that we'll get into in the coming weeks. So what we are going to do is create a composition from footage. And what we're going to find is that Mac App Loader recording. All right, so you can either double click or click it once and click import, and you'll see that basically it's just a zoomed in version of a Mac screen with Premiere Pro icon, and if you hit the space bar it will play, and you'll see it's playing along here. So basically in your timeline here now we have one layer, which is the Mac App Loader recording MP4. You can see up here in the top that it, and I'll just stop that. Just click anywhere in here in the timeline to stop it, or hit the spacebar. So you'll see that because we created a comp from footage, that we have a composition, and that's what this is called. That's that little icon. And you'll see that it will match exactly the actual video file. So we have 500 by 500 pixels, 30 frames per second. It's about 4 seconds long, and we're going to trim that down. All right, so this is what your compositions look like, and this is obviously the name of it right down here. So what we want to do is basically trim this so that we get a perfect loop. All right, because right now this is just, a random recording and it goes on forever. So what I want to do is find either a spot right up at the top where it's still for a frame, probably there. And what I'm going to do is change the work area. So you'll see that this is the timeline right here. But beneath it, this little bar, if you go right over to the left, you'll see it's a work area. So if I click and I drag that, I can shorten the work area. So now when I hit spacebar, it's only going to start playing from here. And what I want to do is go all the way up and then right basically to where it's at the top again, right? Or maybe just one previous to that. So maybe there. And I'm going to go right over to the right hand side and click and drag it in. And now if I hit spacebar, we should have a perfect loop. All right, so you can see how much shorter this is. This loading icon, or preloader, I guess, is very, very short, which is great. So now I don't need all this extra space. That's just going to bug me. So what I'm going to do is hover over this work area and right click and go trim comp to work area. And now you'll see that our entire composition is just a few frames long. Now you can see it's right here, it's starting at, it says 14 frames, and you can see over here on the right that it's got the actual number. Now that's kind of confusing, right? It's not telling you exactly how many layers it is. So what we'll do is go right up to the top and we'll click on the composition and we'll go to composition settings. All right, and when you do that, you'll see that this dialog box comes up, And you can change the comp name if you want to, and you can see how big it is, how the frame rate is, and you can see down near at the bottom that it says start timecode. So we just want to change that to 0. And you'll see right in here, this is very, very important when you want to make your own compositions length, that all these little colons are very important. So this one here is hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. And if you ever get to an hour-long composition in After Effects, you're doing something wrong. You need to go over to Premiere Pro. All right. Or any other editor. But yeah, we'll probably just work in here. So if I wanted to make this, say, 5 minutes, I would go 5 seconds. I would do that and go 0, 0. You always have to have that last little bit there. All right, but I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to see if undo works. No. So what I'll do is, well, I can probably just hit that. So we're back to our 21 frames, and I'll click OK. And it should be, if I hit spacebar, yeah, it's still good. So now I know that this is starting at 0, and it only goes for 20 frames. Starts at 0, it's, well, technically 21 frames. All right, so now what I want to do is copy this, right, to try to match the animation. So we need a new layer in order to put some keyframes in it. So I'm going to go up to the top, Layer, New, and then you'll see all of your options. You can get a solid layer, which is basically just like a solid layer in Photoshop. And then there's lights and cameras, which we will get into much later on. Null objects are basically just anchor points that you can use to parent things and help with animation. I'll show you that in the coming weeks. And then there's a shape layer. This is basically the same as a solid, but much more robust, way more options, and really gets into that amazing sort of morphing shape type animation that we'll get into. And then an adjustment layer, which is basically used to put over top of everything and put effects on. So, so whenever you need, or whenever you're going to put an effect on something in After Effects, it needs a layer to sit on. So sometimes you just want to put an adjustment layer so that it affects everything underneath it, like in this, if you have a bunch of layers down in your timeline. All right, but we'll get into that in the coming weeks, and then there's a bunch more higher level options. So what we want to do, let's just start with a solid, because it is it's sort of the easiest sort of introduction. And if you click solid, it'll ask you what color do you want it. Do you want it the same size? We could just actually make it a whole lot easier and make it smaller. Let's make it like, I don't know, 250 by 250. And I'm just hitting tab to go through those. And we want something a little easier to see, so we can so it's easier to see our animation. Click OK, and you can see the name changes. Now you can obviously rename that now or later, it doesn't matter. So if I click OK now, you'll see I've created a new solid. It's 250 by 250 pixels, and you'll see it comes up. It always comes up on the top level of your stacking order down here in your timeline. So now what we want to do is open it up. And so when I say open it up, or twirl it open, or twirl it down, it means you're going to this little chevron arrow thingy, and you're clicking it open, and then you'll see what transforms. So you click it again, and so now we have the ability to start creating our animation. So first what I want to do is maybe put that right up in the, look at that, what an amazing perfect size for us. So you can see by me pushing it around in here that if you look at the position keyframes, they move in that way at the same time. So you'll see this is X axes and this is Y axes. So X is horizontal, So if I click this, you'll see it's moving horizontally, and this is our y-axis, and it's vertical. So what I want to do is make a keyframe. So whenever you're starting an animation in After Effects, you have to start by getting this little keyframe thing here. It says time vary stopwatch, which literally I've never heard anyone ever call it a time vary stopwatch. You just basically have to click that once. Okay, and now you can see we have our beautiful little keyframe, our little diamond linear keyframe, and we'll get into the different types of keyframes in a minute. Alright, so what I want to do in order to create this loop, because I know it starts there and then it goes down and then it goes right back up, right? So I want to go to the end of my timeline, and you don't have to drag it, you can just sort of click your way around. What I want to do is actually have this keyframe, this exact one, over here as well. So I could, there's a few ways. I could go over to the right here and click this little diamond which says add or remove keyframe at current time, which means your timeline indicator is wherever it is. If I click that, you'll see I've made a new keyframe that's exactly the same as the previous one. If I undo that, just Control Z for that, or Command Z. The other way you can do that is literally just click and drag a marquee and like to select it, or just go and click on it and copy paste. So Control or Command C, Control or Command V, and you see where it'll paste wherever your timeline indicator is. So if mine was here and I hit V, you'd see it be pointing there as well. Alright, so now I know I have a keyframe at the beginning and I have a keyframe at the end. So now I need to go down into the middle and find where it hits the ground, which doesn't really seem to be at the middle, somewhere around there. And if I want to move this shape, there's a few ways I could do that. I could click and drag it, and you can see now we get a motion path there. And if I hold down Shift, you'll see it'll snap to, in this case, 90-degree angles. So that's pretty good. That works for us. I could also just go and click on the y-axis over here and drag it around. All right, so now I know that I have more or less a really terrible tracing of that animation. All right. And the reason why it's so terrible is because it's linear. You can see by these keyframes it's linear, so it doesn't slow down and it doesn't speed up. It literally just goes and stops, goes and stops. And that's not what happens in real life. Nothing in the actual physical universe is going at 100% or 100 miles an hour, 100,000 miles an hour instantly, right? Even the fastest things in the world, they do have a slow in and slow out, and I will get into that during our class this week. So what I want to do is get all of these keyframes. I want to select all of them, and I want to put an easy ease on them. And so what I'm going to do, the easiest way for me to select all the keyframes on a layer is to actually go and click the word. So in this case, I've clicked the word position, and you can see now I have all of my keyframes selected. And now I can just go and right click on one of them. So just right click there, and you can see there's a bunch of options. And right down at the bottom, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. And so I would recommend to learn that shortcut, because you'll find out very quickly how much I care about easy easing. It's kind of the bare minimum for you. So we definitely want that on all, or in 99% of cases we want that. So you click Easy Ease, and you can see now we get this beautiful hourglass shape. And now if I hit that, it's pretty good. It's getting there. Oh, but you know what? I realized that we don't want it to ease in at the bottom, right? If this is going to be like a bouncing ball, it's supposed to be getting faster. So what I'm going to do is just undo that, Control Command Z, and instead I'm going to select these two. Now I can select one and then hold down Shift and select two. So you can see I've got the ones on the end selected, and I'm going to leave that one there alone. So if I just right click on one of these now, Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease, you can see now I have these beautiful Beziers, and now it's pretty good. It's passable. We could do a little more tweaking with our graph editor, but I'll hold off on that until until we get into it a little more. But just know that there's this guy right up here called the graph editor, and if I have one of these selected and I click on one of them on this graph editor, you can see that we get a graphical representation of our animation. And you can see now it's slowing, it's getting faster, and then it's getting slower. So if I wanted to make this perfect, I would probably just push these around and have them going up as fast as they can, and maybe just grab these Bezier handles out as well, and make sure that it's nice, and you want this as smooth as you can, basically. There we go. Now if I hit play, we're doing pretty good. There's a little bit extra movement, but you know, this is really passable, and it absolutely looks like it's traced that object. Now I'm going to get out of that graph editor, and now I don't even need this recording anymore. I can just turn off the eyeball for it, or I could just delete the entire layer, and now I have my own beautiful animation. Alright, so I'll just hit pause there. Now, the one thing when you get into I had my toggle switches modes on down here, and so you can see the blend modes just like in Photoshop, but yours probably will look like this, which is switches, and you can see there's a bunch of options. And one of the options what we want is right here on each of these layers. You can choose to put on motion blur, and what that does is, as it's saying, it's simulating the shutter angle, right? The shutter duration. Basically After Effects is trying to reproduce real world physics as best as it can, and what you'll see is that if I click on the motion blur for that layer, most newer or all of the newer Adobe After Effects will turn it on for the comp as well. And now you can see if I pull this down to where it's at its fastest, you can start to see that there's a little bit of blur in there. Now if I turn it off, you can see it goes away completely. And the faster your keyframes are, or like the closer they are together. So if I were to go here and click and bring that really close, and then this one also really close, you can see that the blur gets even more dramatic. It's really actually trying to reproduce real world physics. So it's pretty amazing. So I'll just put those back, and now if I do it, we have something that really could pass as a preloader, really. So there you go. That is your introduction to After Effects, and it's the way we can trace these images and make some animation of our own. You could, there's all kinds of places to go from here, but I just wanted to give us a good start. And so now what I want to do is render this off, right? So we go up to composition, and you'll see there's two options. There's add to media encoder, which depending on your system, you'll have to download it from the from Adobe CC Cloud thing, Creative Cloud, and if you have done that, you'll have to make sure it's dynamically linked to After Effects. So There's a bit of work involved with that. Hopefully it's automatic, but sometimes it won't work properly. So I'm happy to help with that, or just head to the Adobe site. And then the other option is to add to the render queue. And so these two options, obviously, absolutely, this is your best option 90% of the time. It really has taken over the sort of rendering workflows. It has many more options and is much more robust than this render queue. All right, so those are the two ways to do it. To create a video, but I'll just show you quickly the add to render queue, because that basically will pop open a new window down here beside your timeline. And there's three options here that you can use. Honestly, just leave best settings alone, but if you click on it, you'll see all the layers, all the options that it's giving you. You'll see that it's defaulting to having motion blur on, so you have to make sure that's there. And then it might also say that it's the time span that it's going to render might be the length of comp or the work area. All right, so so again, make sure of that. But our work area is the length of our comp, so that's fine. All right, so I'll just click OK for that. The main thing we need to do here is click on lossless, because what that is the codec, the way in which it's being rendered. So in the format. So you'll see here mine is defaulting to an AVI because this is because I'm on a PC. But you can click and change that. You can make TIFF sequences. You could even just render off audio if you wanted to there as well. But you'll see I'm going to switch mine to QuickTime. And then what you'll see over here is the format options. So this is important because it's the actual codec that you're using. And it's the way it gets encoded. So it defaults to animation, which is fine, especially for something this small. But when you get into bigger files, it gets really quite hard, and it creates really big files. So we don't want that for the most part. But you'll see here there's a bunch of options depending on what's shipped with your computer or what system you're working on. So I'll just leave that there and click OK. And then there's a bunch more options. If you wanted to render out with alpha, you can do RGB plus alpha. I'm not going to worry about that for now. I'll get into that in the coming weeks. You can resize it or crop it. We don't need audio, so I'll just turn that off just for whatever. And then I'll click OK. And then the third thing we need to do is click where it's going to be rendered out to. So I'll click on Not Yet Specified. And it'll just, we can just shoot that over to the desktop or wherever you want it to be. And you can see it's going to create a QuickTime, and where, it'll basically what the name of it defaults to is the name of the composition. So the last thing we got to do is way over in the right hand side, click render, and that's how fast it is. Really super mega fast, and so yeah, not too hard. So you can see this was the actual one that we were tracing, and this is the one we just created. It's an MOV file, and if I double click that, well, I guess you won't be able to see it, but it should just start working. Sometimes you're whatever, if you're on PC, it might not work, but we could actually just bring this recording into After Effects. Yep, is it gonna work? Yep, there we go. And so I could here I could render. I could just double click it and open it and see how it goes. You can see it opens in its own window there. Or we could right click on it and say new comp from selection, and then just hit play. That's a whole lot easier. And we have our render, we have our recording. All right. I know I went fast, I know I zoomed through it, but take your time, and I'd love to have you try that out and come to me with questions if you have. That is the way to bring in a file and sort of trace out any imagery that you have. All right, so we will see you in class. There I am, and we will. I'll be going through a little bit more in After Effects. Obviously, a lot more throughout the term. But what we'll do in class is we will work on just a very simple looping rotation. All right. So we will see you in class. Thank you. Cheers.